It was early March of 2019, when the cold hadn't quite given up, but spring already teased in the air. I'd just moved into a small one-bedroom on the edge of Syracuse. Cheap rent, quiet neighbors. The kind of place you think you'll build peace in. That illusion didn't last. The first night something felt wrong. I'd just gotten home from work. I was microwaving leftovers when I noticed him. A man standing across the street, directly under the orange streetlight. Still, facing my window. He didn't move, didn't smoke, didn't look around. Just watched. I closed the blinds, locked the balcony door, and told myself it was nothing. By morning, he was gone. 2 nights later, he came back. This time, closer by the parking lot curb, looking up at my building. The same heavy gray coat. My stomach turned to ice. I shut the blinds, turned off every light, and waited in the dark. Nothing happened. When I looked again, he was gone. I told my coworker, Jordan, probably just a drunk guy, he said, shrugging. Call the cops if he shows up again. I wanted to believe that, but the next night, I woke at 2 a.m. to soft tapping on glass. Tap, 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 pause it. The sound crawled from my living room window. There was no wind, no branches, just that steady, deliberate rhythm. When it stopped, I stayed awake till dawn. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, until I saw him again, standing beneath the street lamp, watching. Sometimes from the lot, sometimes by the courtyard. Never doing anything, just being there. I told the property manager. She smiled politely. No one's reported anything suspicious, Mr. Walker. That night, I set my phone to record video, facing the window, just to prove I was paranoid. At 3:17 a.m., movement. A faint shape passing by the glass. Then tapping. Then a face pale, inches from the window pane staring in. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The next morning, I called in sick. I checked the hallway camera with the manager. Nothing. No one. The footage was clean. How could he be there and not there at once? That night, the smell hit me first. Cigarette smoke, old, bitter, familiar. Then an orange ember pulsing just beyond the blinds. Someone was smoking outside my window. I called 911. There's someone outside my window, I whispered. He's been coming back. The operator told me to stay on the line. I watched as the ember disappeared before sirens reached the street. 2 officers came, checked the property. No sign of entry, one said. Nothing to climb. They told me to keep my blinds closed and call again if it happened. When they left, I noticed ash on the inside of the window frame. Just a thin crescent. Inside. I never opened those windows. The next day, I told Jordan again. If someone was inside, you'd know, he said, half joking. Would I asked. He frowned. Get maintenance to check everything. The manager sent a guy named Carlos. He checked locks, windows, the closet, the vent. See, he said. Just dust. But when he left, I noticed 2 of the vent screws were chewed up, turned too many times. I pulled the vent cover off myself. Behind it, darkness, pipes, fiberglass. No room to crawl. But something about that void felt watched. I taped a single strand of hair across the corner of the vent cover, a trick I'd read online to see if something moves. That night, I laid a fine line of flour across the kitchen tiles, by the vent and heater closet. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the fridge. I fell asleep with my bat leaning on the nightstand. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up. No sound, just the sense that the air had shifted, and light leaking under my bedroom door. The lamp in the living room was on. My pulse thundered in my ears. I eased the door open. Light stretched across the hall, motionless. Then a flicker. The shadow of a knee? A shoulder? I stepped into the hall, bat raised. Hey. Silence. Then, a whisper, soft. Close. I know you're awake. The lamp clicked off. Darkness swallowed everything. When I turned the light back on, the room was empty. My phone had been moved, set upright, camera still recording, facing the hallway. Then I saw the flower, a clear half-print of a heel leading from the heater closet. The closet door hung open a fraction. I yanked it open and swung the bat. Metal rang out. The heater hummed innocently. But behind it, a square patch of drywall looked wrong, cut too neatly. I pried it loose. Cold air rushed from the dark cavity behind it. Then a voice whispered, "Don't." I swung again, connected with something soft. A grunt, a rustle, then the sound of someone sliding away inside the walls. I slammed the panel back, shoved the dresser against the closet door, and called 911. When the police arrived, Carlos came too. He looked pale as he unscrewed the vent. His flashlight trembled as it lit the space. "There's a platform in there," he said quietly. "And a blanket." They pulled out a duffel bag. Inside, wrappers, a lighter, and that same gray coat. Then they found the Polaroids. My living room. My bed. Me, asleep. The younger cop told the older one not to show me the photos, but he already had. The Polaroids were grainy, overexposed, but the images were clear enough. My living room in weak orange light. My shoulder as I slept on the couch. The ceiling above my bed. My own hands holding my phone shot from inches away. I couldn't speak, couldn't even process the shape of fear that settled inside me. The officers searched the crawl space behind the wall. It connected through the vent system, a thin vertical chase where the building's wiring and ducts ran between units. Carlos found planks wedged between studs, forming a small ledge, a pillow, snack wrappers, cigarette butts. Someone had been living there. They found another access panel hidden behind my kitchen cabinet, worn from being removed again and again. That space led down to a vacant unit below mine, then into the crawl space above the laundry room. A path through the walls. No hallway cameras. No alarms. Just darkness. The officers swept the property with flashlights, brought in a dog. Nothing. Whoever it was had already slithered away through the vents, a ghost with skin. The property manager kept saying, "I'm so sorry," as if she could smooth over reality with apology. They put me in a guest unit that night. I didn't sleep there either. Every sound the heater made felt like something testing the drywall. The detective came the next morning. He laid the Polaroids on the table between us, careful not to touch them more than he had to. "Anyone you've told about living alone?" he asked. "Maybe an ex? Delivery guys? Maintenance?" When he said that word, I froze. Maintenance? People who know the structure of a building sometimes get ideas, he said. Sometimes it's personal. Sometimes it isn't, until it becomes personal. He told me they'd found cigarette butts wedged in the vent shaft. He was probably coming in while you were gone, mapping your habits. Then at night, he'd come back. The smoke, the tapping, he was checking if you'd stir. The airflow would carry it through the apartment. I asked how long he thought the man had been there. He looked at the photos, long enough to feel like it was home. I moved out that same week. The complex didn't fight it. They even sent movers to help pack. I left behind half my stuff, couch, TV stand, even the bed frame. I didn't want anything that had shared air with him. My new place was across town, top floor, reinforced windows that latched like car doors. I sealed every vent with tape, set up cameras that sent motion alerts straight to my phone, even sprinkled baby powder in front of every closet like a ritual. For a while, nothing happened. I started to sleep again, started to believe that maybe I was done being afraid. When I told the story to friends, they'd listen with wide eyes, then laugh nervously. "Man, that's straight out of a horror movie." I'd laugh too, pretending I was past it, pretending it was something that could end. 2 months later, I got a padded envelope in the mail. No return address. Local postmark. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed my new bedroom window blinds closed, taken from outside the building at night. The flash had blown the slats into white ribs. The angle was wrong. Impossible at least 5 stories high, like someone had been hanging off the fire escape or perched on a nearby roof. Taped beneath the photo was a key. Old brass, worn at the edges. Stamped on the bow, my former unit number. On the back of the Polaroid, in block letters, were 5 words. "I never left your window." For days, I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment. Every reflection in the glass felt alive. Every creak behind the walls made my heart seize. I told myself the photo was a sick joke, maybe the detective, maybe someone at the complex who'd heard the story. But part of me knew better. That sense you get when something is watching you, not from the outside, but from the seams of the room itself. I switched apartments again a month later, across the city. This time in a building from the 1,922nd solid brick. No vents connecting the walls. I stopped using curtains entirely. Let the daylight fill every corner. But at night, when the city dimmed and the streetlights hummed, I sometimes felt the old weight of a stare. Like the darkness hadn't moved with me, it had simply waited. One night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through my phone and rewatched the old footage, the one from that first apartment. The video where I'd caught his reflection in the glass. I paused it at the moment the face appeared. For the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. In the faint reflection behind the man's shoulder, there was another face. Mine, but not from inside. From behind him, like I'd been standing outside, watching myself through the window. The clip ended with the same faint tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, and then a whisper I'd never heard clearly before until that night. Don't move. I deleted the video after that. Or thought I did. Because sometimes, when I wake my phone in the dark, the screen shows a thumbnail, a frozen frame of the man's reflection, half buried in the photo gallery. No matter how many times I erase it, it comes back. It's been 6 years now. I've moved twice more. No new photos, no strange noises, no smoke. But I still can't sleep with the blinds open. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, I hear a faint scrape not from the walls, but from the glass itself. It's softer than a knock, gentler than a breath, a sound that feels like someone reminding you. They never really leave. My name is Ethan Cole, and I used to think my life had hit rock bottom when I dropped out of the engineering program at community college. Turns out, I was wrong. The worst part came later when I landed the job that was supposed to help me pay off the student loans I'd racked up in those 2 short years. I worked the night shift, the so-called graveyard shift, at a 24/7 self-storage facility on the outskirts of Oregon. The place had the ironically cheerful name Secure Vault. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 8 long hours of total isolation, just me, and 48 glowing security screens. My job was to monitor all 6 endless corridors of storage units and log every entry and exit, but nothing ever happened. Just rows of metal boxes stuffed with other people's forgotten junk. The most exciting thing I usually saw was a raccoon trying to squeeze through the security gate. But that monotonous routine, it was a trap. It made me complacent. It made me careless. And on one particular Tuesday night, while I was floating in that near-hypnotic state, the pattern broke. That's when I realized isolation wasn't the real problem. The eyes were. It was 3:17 a.m. I was about to cycle through the camera feeds when I saw it on screen 4, the feed for hallway J, specifically the camera inside storage unit J14. There was a man. I froze. He was just sitting there, completely still, his back to the camera, facing the metal wall at the far end of the unit. He wore a dark, old-looking coat, and his hair was slicked down under the harsh white LED light. My heartbeat spiked, pounding in my chest. This broke every rule the facility had. Every single one. I immediately zoomed in on the feed from Unit J14. The man didn't move. He looked like a statue carved from shadow. I quickly pulled up the entry log for hallway J. No record of any door being opened. Then I checked the main gate log. The gate had been locked since 9 p.m. No vehicles entered, no access codes used. Anyone entering would have triggered the motion sensors. And then I looked closer. I used the mouse to zoom in on the image inside J14 again. Clear as day on the latch outside the unit was a heavy, silver padlock. The kind customers bring themselves. The kind only they have the key for. That man was inside a storage unit that was locked from the outside with a personal lock. That was impossible. It defied every physical rule of this facility. I scrubbed through the recorded footage from the previous 2 hours. At 2 hours, 4 minutes and 58 seconds a.m., the unit was completely empty, just an old cardboard box sitting in the corner. At 2 hours, 5 minutes a.m., he was there, sitting down. No door opened, no sound, no movement. He simply appeared, like a glitch in reality itself. The air in the control room suddenly felt heavier, thicker, pressing against my chest. I needed to confirm it. I couldn't just call 911 and say, "There's a man sitting inside a locked storage unit. He appeared out of nowhere on my cameras." They'd send a psych evaluation before they sent a patrol car. I grabbed my heavy aluminum flashlight and the security baton, the one I'd never thought I'd actually need. I had to see that lock with my own eyes. I had to hear the silence for myself. I hurried down hallway J, a long tunnel of gray metal and flickering fluorescent lights, dragging my shadow behind me. Finally, I reached Unit J-14. The light overhead buzzed faintly, throwing long, warped shadows across the floor. I aimed my flashlight at the latch. The lock was still there, a silver master lock, 40, untouched, unbroken. I shook the door lightly. It was sealed tight. I closed my eyes. Inhale, exhale. I was just tired. It had to be a ghost image, a camera glitch, visual fatigue. It had to be. I pressed my ear against the cold metal door, expecting silence, emptiness. But I was wrong. I heard a sound. A slow, wet exhale, like someone had been holding their breath for far too long and finally let go. Then another sound followed. A faint, delicate scraping, like fingernails dragging lightly along the inside of corrugated steel. It came from the far end of the unit, the side the man on the camera had been facing. He was there, inside, alive. And that realization sent me running back to the security room. I had to find out who rented that unit and how the hell that man had appeared out of nowhere in what was supposed to be the most secure place I knew. I ran back to the security room as if something monstrous was chasing me, gripping my baton so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and collapsed into the cracked leather chair. My heart was pounding like a jackhammer. I had to call the police, but I already knew what they would say. Break in? We'll need proof. What did you see on the cameras? A man just sitting there? No signs of forced entry? Are you sure you're all right, Ethan? I needed undeniable proof, something that couldn't be explained away as a random trespasser. I turned back to the control panel, cold sweat dripping down my neck. I pulled up the customer database and typed in the storage unit number, J14. The information appeared. The renter's name was Elias Vance. Address, APO box in a small town 300 miles away. Phone number, disconnected. Rental date, exactly 2 years ago. Automatic monthly payments ever since. I checked the shipment details. Description, boxes, old clothes. Nothing unusual, but one chilling detail caught my eye. The unit had been rented right after it was cleared and sanitized following an incident. An incident I wasn't authorized to know about. I looked back at camera 4. Elias Vance was still sitting there, his back turned, motionless, silent. I rewound the footage to a minute after the scratching stopped. Still, no movement, no sign of life. He looked like a lifeless rag doll propped up in the corner. And then, the silence broke in the most horrifying way possible. The man began to move, very slowly. Inch by inch, he raised his right hand. His hand looked filthy, almost blackened with unnaturally long fingers. He was holding something. I zoomed in on the screen, my eyes straining to make it out. It was a piece of paper crumpled, torn from what looked like an envelope. Elias Vance slowly opened his palm. The paper had handwriting on it, written in a dark, rust-colored ink. When he lifted it straight toward the camera lens, I could read the words. And the moment I did, I nearly threw up right there at the control desk. My sweat turned cold as ice. The handwriting was jagged, as if scribbled in the dark. It said only 2 sentences. I know her name, Ethan. In that instant, the illusion of safety inside Secure Vault shattered. Elias Vance wasn't some random intruder, nor a homeless man looking for shelter, nor a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. He was a monster one that knew my name. And worse, he knew hers. Her name was Sarah Reynolds. Sarah was the one who had died in a car accident 3 years ago, a crash I'd been trying to move past. It was my pain, my deepest secret. No one at Secure Vault knew about Sarah. Not a single coworker. I never said it out loud, not in any file, not to the manager. I'd moved to Oregon to start over. Somehow, this man had not only found me, but also discovered the thing I'd buried the deepest. He'd gotten past walls, past locks, but more terrifyingly, he'd breached the psychological defenses I'd built. He had broken into the storage unit of my mind. I shot up from my chair, fear coiling with a furious, manic rage. He wasn't just stalking me, he was daring me. He was using my old wound to torture me. I stared at the screen. After holding the scrap of paper up, Elias Vance had returned to his original pose, sitting silently with his back turned. But this time, I knew he wasn't a ghost. He was a threat, a personal threat. I grabbed the security baton. The police were useless. This wasn't a case to be investigated. It was a personal enigma trying to ruin me. I wasn't going to call 911 and wait for them to show up to find an empty unit. I would deal with this myself. I would confront Elias Vance. I ran to the maintenance toolbox and pulled out a heavy bolt cutter. I would cut that lock, even if it wasn't actually locked. I would drag that bastard out of his metal box and force him to tell me who he was and what he knew about Sarah. I was no longer afraid. I'd switched to attack mode. I left the security room, the camera screen still showing Elias Vance sitting in the locked unit with a blood-stained scrap of paper on the floor. I ran down hallway J. This time I did not creep. The sound of my shoes slapped loudly through the quiet corridor. I was ready to fight. Hallway J had never felt so long. I didn't feel cold this time. I was burning every cell in my body taut with a mixture of adrenaline, fear, and primeval rage. He knew about Sarah. That was unacceptable. I stood in front of Unit J14. The Master Lock 40 gleamed under my flashlight. I knelt, set the heavy bolt cutters against the lock shackle. No hesitation. I threw my entire weight into it, squeezing the handles as hard as I could. The metallic crack echoed down the corridor, a violent pop that shattered the night silence. The lock flew free, tumbled across the concrete floor, spun, and came to rest. I didn't even bother to pick it up. I yanked the handle and ripped the heavy roll-up door upward. I was ready for a physical confrontation. I was ready to shout, to attack, to demand answers. But when the door rolled all the way up and revealed the interior of the unit, I was completely stunned. I could only stand there, panting. The security baton lowered in my hands. The unit was empty. Completely empty. No Elias Vance. No dark coat. No blood-stained scrap of paper. Just cold concrete floor, a little dust in the corners, and a single spiderweb dangling from the ceiling. It was empty, spotless, perfect as if the unit had just been cleaned out. My rage dissolved into a numb, chilling bewilderment, worse than any fear I had ever known. I stepped inside, sweeping the flashlight beam across every inch. I even tapped the walls with the baton, struck the floor. No trapdoor, no hollow space, no exit. No, this can't be, I whispered. I had heard the breath. I had heard the scratching. I had seen him on the camera. I had read the note. None of it could have been a hallucination. Something had been missed. Something involving time or the system. I sprinted out of the empty unit like a man possessed. I didn't bother to close the door. My only goal was the security room. I had to review the footage. I had to know exactly what happened in the time between when I left the control room and when I reached Unit J14. I burst into the room, nearly collapsing onto the console, and immediately looked at screen 4, the J14 camera feed. And he was still sitting there. Elias Vance was still in the unit, back turned, motionless, as if nothing had happened. I glanced at the live feed. The J14 camera was showing Elias Vance in real time. I checked the entrance to the building. It was still locked. I had secured it myself. I looked at the clock, 3:45 a.m. If he's in there, then who's outside? I wondered. No, that made no sense. I had just opened the door. The unit was empty. The camera was live. I quickly rewound the J14 recording, starting from the moment I'd left the security room the second time, carrying the bolt cutters. On the screen, footage of me running out of the room. Then a long stretch of silence, Elias Vance sitting still. 3:42, 5 amperes. M. I appear in the hallway camera's view, swallowed by the dark. I stop in front of J14. I kneel, position the bolt cutters. 3 hours, 42 minutes, and 15 seconds a.m. A sharp, metallic crack. The lock drops to the floor. I yank the rolling door upward. And that's when my heart nearly stops. The moment the door begins to rise on the video, the image of Elias Vance on the J14 camera starts violently flickering. He doesn't stand up. He doesn't run. He simply distorts, like a corrupted transmission signal. When the doors fully open and I step inside the unit, the J14 camera feed cuts out 5 full seconds of static. 3, 40, 2, 35 amperes. M. The feed returns. The unit in the video is now empty exactly as I'd seen it in real life. But Elias Vance is gone. Or rather, he's changed position. He's standing precisely where I had stepped in, facing forward, staring straight into the camera lens. His eyes are sunken, almost like twin black voids. His skin is a sickly gray, and on his forehead, I can clearly see an old scar shaped like a cross. His lips move. No sound, but I can read them. One single word: Sarah. Then the J14 feed freezes. Not a glitch an image. The face of Elias Vance, staring directly at me, replaces the entire live feed. I jerk upright, frozen before the screen. Physics had failed. I had seen him inside. I had seen the empty unit. But on the camera, he had been waiting for me to open that lock, and then slipped out of the physical world the instant I stepped in. My body was trembling uncontrollably. He didn't live inside the storage unit. He lived inside the system. He lived in the signal, within the camera network. The lock had only been a ritual. He needed me to open it. He needed me to complete this photonic transaction so he could escape the confines of the unit. And the last thing I did was panic, desperately trying to shut off the monitors. But the face of Elias Vance, with those hollow black eyes, kept staring at me from camera J14, bleeding through every other screen. Now I understood. He had broken into my life. He knew about Sarah, and he had waited for me inside a locked storage unit, the only place where he could be sure I would come. I had tried to bury Sarah in the past, but Elias Vance had brought her back, and he had used my own security technology as the gateway. Since that night, I've never looked at Secure Vault the same way again. I quit the next morning without a word, but every time I open my laptop, every time I glance at my phone screen, I can't help but wonder, if he could exist within the digital signal, then where did he go? And how would I ever know he isn't still watching me, waiting for me to turn on another camera, another screen, just to hold up another piece of paper with another name on it? And that's why I have to tell this story.
The cameras are useless
because I don't
now.
feel safe
Whatever is
anymore.
here, it's digital.
Not in the
and it's
physical
everywhere.
world, and certainly not in this digital one. It was the summer of 2012. I was 20, just finished my second year of college, and needed cash before the fall semester. My friend Marcus and I landed internships at a logistics firm 3 hours north of our university. The company housing was awful, so we rented a cheap, rundown house on Blackwood Drive, a quiet street shaded by ancient oaks. The place was old peeling paint, overgrown yard, low ceilings, but the rent was low, and that's what mattered. The weirdness started right away, though it was subtle at first. Mail we left on a rickety table by the front door kept disappearing. Not bills or important letters, just flyers or coupons with our names on them. Marcus, the skeptic, blamed drafts or our forgetfulness. "It's an old house, Alex," he said one night, wiping pizza grease from his face. "Wind probably blew them off. But it wasn't random. Only envelopes addressed to us vanished, like someone was curating them. Then came the window. The house had a small mudroom off the kitchen with an old crank window. One morning, I found it slightly open, half an inch. I hadn't touched it. The screen was dusty, and we never used the mudroom. I locked it, assuming Marcus had left it open. That night, I felt a cool draft while grabbing water in the kitchen. The window was open again, 2 inches this time, screen still latched. I stared, my brain wrestling with logic, an old latch, a settling house against the creeping sense that this wasn't accidental. I woke Marcus. "The mudroom window's open again," I said. "I locked it this morning." He stumbled over, half asleep, and shrugged after a quick look. "Lock's probably shot. Jammed some wood in the track." He was all reason, no paranoia. But the next morning changed everything. On the dining table, next to my water glass, sat a small carved pine bird, a crude sparrow with deep, pinprick eyes, stained dark like it had been handled for years. "Did you buy this?" Marcus asked, picking it up, confused. "No," I said, my voice tight. "It wasn't here last night. We checked every door and window. No forced entry. Someone had been inside, leaving this eerie token. The missing mail and open window weren't accidents, they were deliberate. Someone was watching us, knew our habits, and wanted us to know they could enter silently. The house on Blackwood Drive wasn't just cheap, it came with a hidden cost." The carved bird marked a turning point. Marcus and I went to our internships that day, but the house's eerie presence lingered. Over lunch, Marcus tried to rationalize it. Maybe a kid left it as a prank, he said, but his voice wavered. I didn't buy it. The missing mail, the window, it was too deliberate. We fortified the house that evening, changing the door locks and jamming dowels into window tracks. We checked the crawl space. Marcus found only dust and old tools. But the feeling of being watched grew into a fear of being trapped with someone already inside. Days passed in hypervigilance. Every creak, the fridge, the oaks, scratching the gutters felt like a threat. Then, on Friday night, while playing cards in the dim living room, we heard it. Slow, heavy footsteps on the back deck. Thud, thud, thud. Not sneaky confident, like someone knew we were listening. I crept to the kitchen window, peering through the blinds. The backyard was dark, but the footsteps were right below. Then they stopped. Silence was worse. They know we're here, Marcus whispered. We didn't call the police, two college guys, afraid of being laughed at. We just sat in the dark, clutching a baseball bat, waiting for a break-in that never came. 2 nights later, Marcus was visiting his girlfriend, leaving me alone. A thunderstorm hit around midnight, knocking out the power. In the pitch black, rain roaring, I heard a slow, deliberate scrape at the front door, like something hard dragging across the wood, tracing a pattern. It wasn't a break-in attempt. It was a message. Someone pressed against the door, marking their presence. I froze, phone flashlight trembling, listening to the scraping pause, then resume, stopping at the deadbolt. I didn't move, terrified to reveal I was awake. It felt like a game, and I was the prey. The scraping stopped, leaving only rain and my pounding heart. At dawn, I checked the street from the dining room window. 50 yards away, under an oak, a tall figure in a dark coat stood. They didn't run, just turned, looked at my window, and raised a hand, flashing a penlight skyward before vanishing into the woods. Their calm was chilling. Marcus returned that morning. I told him everything. "Pack a bag," he said, his skepticism gone. "We're out." We threw our stuff into boxes and checked the house one last time. The front door had faint scratches where I'd heard the scraping. In the mudroom, tucked into the windowsill, was a folded bank statement mine from the missing mail. My name, hometown address, and move-in date were circled in black marker. It wasn't a threat, just proof. The night owl had been watching me specifically, collecting details of my life. We fled Blackwood Drive within the hour, leaving the boxes behind. We finished our internships from a motel, jumping at every unknown call or tall figure on the street. I never learned who the night owl was or what they wanted. Somewhere, a carved sparrow and a marked statement remain. Reminders that someone out there knows me better than I know them, and they're still watching.